and we're so glad that you're here today. My name is Brittany Tain. I'm the Senior Marketing Associate with the National Benevolent Association, and I would like to welcome you to the Building Community Through Storytelling, Sharing Bible Stories, and Our Own Stories webinar. The NBA is a health and social service ministry partner of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and we collaborate with leaders and with health and social service organizations to strengthen and transform communities through compassion, healing, and justice. So before we begin today, I have just a couple of notes to pass along to all of you. So first, I just want to remind all of you that today's webinar is being recorded. So you can choose to turn your camera off, you can keep it on, doesn't matter, that's up to you, but we did want to let you know that it's being recorded. We do ask, though, that you make sure to check real quick to make sure that your microphone is set to mute. Later on in today's webinar, we will have a breakout session, and at that time, we do encourage you to make sure that your camera is on in those smaller group conversations. Also, I wanted to let you know that in addition to today's webinar, we have several resources available for those working in ministries with older adults. I encourage you to visit our Older Adult Ministry resource page at nbacares.org/OAM resources. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Jan Airy, who will get us started today. Jan?
Thank you so much, Britt. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jan Airy. We're so excited that you're here today. I'm coordinator of the Older Adult Ministries in partnership with NBA and our Disciples of Christ of Home Missions. And so today we're offering you this webinar, and it will be recorded for later as well, with an amazing turnout of people. I want to just briefly take a couple of minutes to tell you about Older Adult Ministries. It's a group of about 15 people from all over the country in our denomination who are practitioners and experts about older adults. They have a passion, and we're working very hard on changing the story about aging to one that's positive. We're also seeing some beautiful revelations and beautiful ramifications of this work in our resources, as well as the way they're being used in congregations, because we're hearing that pastors who were once discouraged about the growing number of gray hair in their pews are finding there are new and creative ways to present ministry and worship. And we're helping to provide what might be needed for that, especially in their encouragement as well. So a couple of facts to share with you. Did you know that storytelling is an essential part of being a human being, especially for those who are in their last quarter or so of life? Being an older adult means that storytelling is so important that neurologists are saying it extends life beyond a few months, but even for years. The other thing that they're finding is storytelling can serve as something as effective as medication or therapy. This is hugely significant for us. And today we're going to be addressing that topic in that way. Now we know that reviewing our life is very important to an older adult, but so is spirituality and putting our spiritual house in order. And these two effects go together in some way, don't they? So today we're talking about storytelling from the Bible first, and then storytelling in our own lives and in groups of people. So today we're going to be introducing or reminding you of a very important storytelling process with Bible studies and stories for children. And Kaye Edwards and Elaine are going to lead us. They are experts and longtime teachers of this process with us. And while they share that, we're going to hear some ways that we can not only ponder our own questions, but ponder ways that we might implement this concept and this way of teaching and sharing stories with others in our church settings. So while we welcome all of you, I'm grateful and want to welcome and thank Kaye and Elaine. We've asked Elaine to introduce herself briefly, then she'll be speaking more later. And then Kaye. Thank you both.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jan. Good morning, everybody, or if you're in the eastern part where I am, good afternoon. This day is so exciting for us with Worship and Wonder, and I am absolutely thrilled with how many people signed up for this group, this webinar. I am the president of Worship and Wonder, and we have been in existence now for 4 years. But I have been a trainer with the Young Children in Worship program and Children Worship and Wonder in the DOC denomination for 23 years. So I've been training churches and individuals and participating as a storyteller for a long, long time. But the beauty that has come out very boldly to not only myself, but many people, is these stories are not just for children. They're very, very impactful for faith formation at every age that we are at. We never stop growing in our faith and our relationship with God, and we never stop finding new things in the scriptures as we read them. So thank you for coming today. I pray that you will benefit greatly from our hour together.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kaye Edwards. I'm the retired Director of Family and Children's Ministries for the Disciples of Christ. But I've stayed involved in the storytelling process, Children Worship and Wonder, that we have shortened to Worship and Wonder now. This one group of us is sort of an offshoot of Children Worship and Wonder because we see the benefits of how these stories can be used with all ages of people. So I'm just going to give a little bit of introduction that Worship and Wonder is an ecumenical faith development program that originally grew out of the Catholic Church in a program known as the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And that book was written by Sophia Cavalletti, and that program was directed by her. The book Young Children in Worship is written by Sonia Stewart and Jerome Berryman, and the Godly Play program is still directed by Jerome Berryman. All of these programs are basically the same, and they're all heavily influenced by Marie Montessori's approach to education. Our Worship and Wonder team believes that this beautiful way of sharing the stories of God and doing faith development with children can actually be used in multi-generational settings with a little bit of tweaking. We believe that it is beneficial for people of different cognitive and physical abilities to be together, hearing and responding to the stories of God. At different points in our lives, we all hear different messages and learn different lessons from these stories. As you will experience, the story is told very slowly. This is so you are able to enter into the story and let your own imagination perhaps help you glean from the story what God has to say directly to you at this particular point in your life. At the end of the story you will hear, there will be an opportunity to respond to and ask your own wondering questions about the story. Then after the story and wondering time, there will be an opportunity for us to share some ideas with you about how this program can be used in church settings and beyond. And you will have an opportunity to ask questions about the storytelling method, about the Worship and Wonder program, or any other questions you have. But we ask you to save those questions until that point in time. So now we ask you to stay in the story and wondering time and ask your questions at the time that's indicated. So come and now let us together enter into the story of Abram and Sarai and their call from God to leave their home.
This is the desert box. So many important things happen in the desert that we just have to have a small piece of it with us to help us worship. The desert is a strange and wild place. At nighttime, it's very cold. But in the daytime, burning hot. There's almost no water at all in the desert. The desert is a strange and wild place. The winds come, and as they blow, they shape and mold the desert, so the desert is never the same. Once, Abram and Sarai lived in the beautiful city of Haran. The one true God loved Abram and Sarai. One day God said to them, "Leave your home and your friends, and I will give you a new land and a new home. It's all right to go. I will be with you, and I will bless you, and I will make you a blessing." Abram and Sarai looked across the desert. It would be sad to leave their home and their friends. They wondered if the one true God would be with them. Abram and Sarai went. They trusted the one true God to show them the way. First, they came to a town called Shechem in the land of Canaan. Abram and Sarai wondered if God would be with them. God had been with them in Haran. Would God be with them in Shechem too? Then God said, "Look at all this land. I will give this land to your children." Abram and Sarai were so happy God was with them, they couldn't help but give thanks. So they built a special place called an altar. And prayed their thanks to God. Next, they moved to a land near Bethel, and God was with them in Bethel. Abram and Sarai were so happy God was with them, they couldn't help but give thanks. So they built an altar and prayed their thanks to God. Then there came a great famine, so there was not enough food to eat. Abram and Sarai were very hungry, so they moved to the land of Egypt for food. Abram was afraid. He was afraid of the people of Egypt. He had forgotten that God had promised to be with him. But God did not forget. God kept Abram and Sarai safe. The people of Egypt were good to Abram and Sarai. They gave them food and animals. Then Abram and Sarai went back to the land of Canaan. Near a place called Hebron. God had been with them in Haran, in Shechem, near Bethel, in Egypt. Would God be in Hebron too? Then God said, I will give you many children to fill this land. Abram and Sarai were so happy God was with them that they couldn't help but give thanks. So they built an altar and prayed their thanks to the one true God who showed them the way. Now Abram and Sarai knew that the one true God who showed them the way was in every place and every time, just as God had promised.
As you ponder the story that you have just heard, probably one that many of you are very familiar with, I'm going to ask some wondering questions. You don't have to answer, but if you feel a desire to respond, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak. Unfortunately, in this large group, which is a wonderful dilemma, I like to call it, we won't be able to see you speaking, but feel free to share your pondering thoughts or just to ponder as I ask the question. I wonder where you see God in this story. I wonder where you are in this story. I wonder if you have ever had to move, and if that moving was your choice. I wonder how moving made you feel. I wonder what is the hardest part of moving to a new place? I wonder if any part of moving ever feels good. I wonder if any part of moving is fun. I wonder what you are wondering about this story. A personal note for me as we move on. I have probably told this story. I can't even count the number of times I've told this story since we have been doing the program. But 2 years and 3 months ago, I made a huge move in my life that I had not moved for 25 years. And about 2 months after our move, I was in a training opportunity and I got to tell this story. I choked up as I told this story because I realized I'm Abram and Sarah right now, and I'm in a new place, and I don't know where I'm going. And it definitely was not feeling fun. So it personally spoke to me. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that right now in your life journey. But for a few minutes, Kay and I want to share with you some of the ways that we have used or see using this program as a great opportunity for sharing in community. One of the things I say that we do not do enough of is share our own stories. And of course, most of us would say, my story's boring. There's really not much to share about it, but it's what makes you who you are. So lots of ways can be used, and these stories are very impactful to every age, as I hope you experienced today. People with varying degrees of disabilities benefit greatly from this program. It's a great intergenerational place to go because everybody hears the stories where they are in their own intellectual, developmental, and faith spot place that they are in their lives. Sunday school is a great place to go to use these stories and create opportunities even for digging deeper into Bible study. Please, Kay, add with me and help me move forward through this.
Well, one of the things that you all might be thinking about as we talk about using these stories with different age groups is everybody can't get down on the floor. And that's okay. The stories can be told on a table. I mean, you can even get with a little help, you can even get the desert box up on a table, or there's desert bags that can be used on a table. If you are doing it on the floor, people can sit in chairs and look down at the story. One of the things that I mentioned in the opening that we really believe that it's good for people of different ages to be together and share their understanding of a story with one another. And I've seen this happen, and I've seen children draw older people out in a setting like this, and help older people feel more comfortable speaking out about their own lives, because children will ask very blunt questions sometimes. And that's really helpful. So having the different ages together is really exciting to me. And in my own church, where there are not many children right now, and so there's been some discussion, well, now what are we going to do about Sunday school when we only have 1 or 2 children in each of the age groupings? So we're going to try doing this very thing that you saw today in an intergenerational setting, so that children will all be together, but they'll be together with each other, but they'll also be with all ages of other people in the church. So I'll have to let you know how that goes after this fall, because we've not tried that again in this setting, like that in this setting before. And I know that lots of people, Elaine among them, have used the stories in camp for the chapel time in camp. And I've used the stories in nursery schools and church weekday nurseries, and brought parents in to listen to the stories with their children. I mean, I just think it's, the sky's the limit in terms of wherever you want to tell a Bible story, you can use these stories. They can be adapted, and you have to tweak the wondering questions some. And as if the children are not really young, like we start this with kids as young as 3, but a little bit older kids, you can do things like, well, I wonder if the story reminds you of another story that you've heard in your life. Well, go get that story and show us how it relates to this story. There's just so many things you can do in the wondering time as you look back on the story with different ages of people. Do you all have any thoughts about where you would like to consider using these stories, or that you've thought about using them? Or if you've ever been to any of the General Assemblies of the Disciples Church, we've told these stories to that huge gathering as well. No chance for any wondering to take place there, but at least not together, but there's just, it's limitless where they could be used. All right, anybody, or you have any questions about? Yes.
Hi, can I add something?
Please do.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I just unmuted myself. I used these stories right at the start of COVID. As we know, churches shut down and we had no idea really when we'd back. We were hoping, oh, we'll be back by Easter. Ha ha ha. Everything's going to be okay in a few weeks. And in between, I knew how much this was going to disrupt our young ones, especially because they don't really understand what was going on. They all of a sudden didn't get to have school and they were home and they couldn't go out. And so I knew that these stories was going to be something that was still going to be consistent for them. And they really needed that, especially at the beginning. And so that very first week, we decided on a Thursday to shut down. I went into church that Friday, picked up, 4 or 5 weeks worth of stories. And that first Sunday that we were shut down, I got to tell the story. And thankfully, a lot of our kids are very tech savvy, and they were able to jump onto Zoom from the very beginning. And it was so helpful for a lot of our parents to just have that moment of knowing there's something consistent here. There's something here that is going to bring them some hope and continue to remind them of their faith. And also for the parents to get a little bit of a break from them, to be able to actually just sit them in front of an iPad or laptop and be able to take their own break as well. So this whole program was so incredible and has stepped in to help in so many ways. And that is one that I'll just hold in my heart forever.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Very much. Because we're so large, if you have a chance to speak, please do so. I see Heather has a hand up, but I can't see everybody with hands on this.
So Heather, go ahead and unmute yourself.
So I have heard about using it, and I've used it some, like, instead of the scripture in service, telling the scripture in this way, or using it as the children's sermon. But I trained to be a storyteller many, many moons ago, and have since moved churches, and tackling the financial investment to get the stories has been my biggest struggle with bringing it to new congregations in a more consistent way.
Well, there are a couple of places now. Elaine can help me with this. There are churches that aren't doing the program anymore, and there are people who have multiple pieces of the pieces to tell the story, the sacred objects. So if you want to contact Elaine or me afterwards, we can help you with a couple of ideas of where you might find some of the story pieces.
Another avenue of finding the stories that have been used and no longer needed is Sally Seltzer at Worship Woodworks. Churches will contact her, and I see Laura Phillips has put that website on our chat, but it's also going to be, and it's also going to be in your resource list that you will receive, the Worship Woodworks. Someone asked me about questions, and we have been working on that. And I know we mentioned the NBA Cares and a lot of the resources that are on that website. And one of those resources is a resource that Kay and Jan and myself and Lois Kelly worked on, called Bringing Generations Together. And we took 3 of the stories from Young Children in Worship, and we stretched out the questions. The questions I asked you today after the Abram and Sarah story are from that resource. And so you can go on that website and look at those things. We also did the parable of the Good Shepherd, and we did creation, I think is the 3rd story. But we're still working to develop more things, because yes, the stories are for everybody, but I will say that the Wondering Questions in the Young Children in Worship resource book, the questions in that book are really definitely elementary questions. But as Kay mentioned, there's so many ways. I did some stories last summer at a family camp in Virginia with our youngest was 9 months, our oldest was 85. And it spurred into small groups of sharing our own stories about traveling. And we used some talk cards and some pictures that is also listed in your resource that spurred us to share our own lives with one another and things that we have done. Sheila, you had your hand up.
Hi, I'm so glad to be able to be here. I've been hesitant going up and down with my hand because I have been working with BibleTelling.org and doing Bible telling online, and have been doing that for over a year now online, although I was teaching Bible telling before that and do training in Bible telling, which has been it's very similar when one of my students actually encouraged me to sign up for this class because they were like, I think you'll like this class as well. And so one of the things that we have in Bible telling are questions that really can help with adults as well. And we also have 260 stories already put together that people can utilize with adults that they can use and share. So I don't want to take away from what you're doing, because I think it's awesome. And I know the power of I am a professional storyteller. That is my job. And so I have watched the power of actually preaching this way although I've called it Bible telling, it's very similar to worship and wonder, actually preaching on a Sunday using this. And one of the effects of doing this on a Sunday was having someone with learning difficulties be able to understand this message much better, because they came to me afterwards and said, I could get the message much better and actually remember it. So that's another thing that happens when you use telling of the word through story, when you use storytelling. And I just don't want to go off base. And I feel like, okay, I'm not allowed to say all these things, but I'm so excited. And I'm also a Disciples of Church of Christ, and I have never heard of you all at all. And I'm like, when I came on, my heart just soared, because I was like, what? Why hasn't anybody told me about this? And now I cannot wait to work with you and alongside you. So please know I want to be able to do that. Thank
Sheila,
you.
Thank you.
I remember now, you and I have had a discussion before through Bill Spangler Dunning connecting us.
Yes,
Virginia,
yes.
right? Okay, let's connect again and move forward with our talking.
There's Diane.
Diane,
Bill
you had something, and then I know we have one more little clip to share before we break into groups.
Yeah, I had a question for any tips or ideas. So one of the things I've been trying to figure out how to do is I'd love to get our folks to do more like sharing of their own stories and like tying them into Bible themes, and like kind of, to either in worship, in place of a sermon, have somebody stand up and be able to talk about their own experiences and story, or in small group settings. And so I'm trying to envision what it might look like to use, tell the Worship and Wonder story, pose the wondering questions, and maybe even like a few weeks later, then inspired by that, help somebody craft the ability to tell their own story inspired by it. And I don't know if anybody has any experience with that, or tips or resources that might help.
Yeah, Diane, that's exactly the kind of thing we're hoping would happen out of this sort of sharing. And I will tell you that mixed groups help that happen better than having all adults together or all children together. And I think even pairing up an adult with a child that's not maybe known to them, not somebody that's in their family, I've found to be helpful at times. But I know, I just think you just start doing it, and maybe even, I hadn't thought about this before, Elaine, but encouraging people to look through the story pieces and maybe pick some out and use the story pieces to tell their own story. It's sometimes helpful to us to have something else to focus on rather than looking right at the person. So if I can tell you a story about my life, but I'm using the manipulatives, and you're looking at that instead of directly at me, might help some people be more comfortable.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we have worked on. Sheila mentioned something that also spurred a resource I've used before, is using the story scripts from young children in worship, but using humans for the people. 3 or 4 years ago, in the last church I served before I retired, on World Communion Sunday, we told the parable of the great banquet. And we had members of the church as the people, as the narrator told the story. One of our members, who's well known for being a gardener, was the one who said, "I'm sorry, I can't come." And I don't remember what phrase he used, but it was in relation to the one who had the fields to plow. But he used his own little clip, and it made everybody laugh. But it was a very powerful impact on the whole congregation to make that. And that's a way of spurring stories of yourself. All right. Are we ready to show the video? And you can keep talking when we do our breakout room in just a few minutes. Kay will have one, Jan will have one, I will have one, and Laura Phillips, who is on here, and she is a trainer with Children Worship and Wonder and a good friend and clergy from out in the Midwest, is also going to lead one of our groups, so we can talk some more. We want to show the video of Lois Kelly, who's a member of our board and a disciples minister out in Kansas, and uses this program in an assisted living facility that she is a chaplain and minister of a congregation that is housed there.
I am Pastor Lois Kelly, and I pastor a church that meets in an independent assisted living facility. And so I use a lot of worship and wonder in various ways with that community, both with just folks with different abilities, wheelchairs and different things, and also some with dementia, some without. So one of the things I like to do, just in my sermon, I will do a wondering question in the middle of the sermon and just kind of allow for the silence to happen. It takes that time of pause and just allow for that. So that is one variation I do. Sometimes if I want to use the figures, it needs to be where they can see them, which in our setting, I'm here in the worship space that we do, it's just a multi-purpose room. So I put them on the screen at times. I did that so I could refer to them and I could point like the distance the shepherds go to the Bethlehem. So using the screen has been another way so that everybody can see the figures and see what I'm talking about. And again, using those wondering questions and allowing for the silence. Another thing I like to do if I have small groups, especially with dementia, it's important to make sure that they kind of understand what you're doing. So sometimes I need to explain a couple of times that we're going to tell a story. And are they comfortable? Are they sitting where they can see the figures? Can they hear? Are they close enough to hear and stay engaged? And then ask those questions. And if there is a response, then I acknowledge it with either just a smile or a nod. Something so that they know that they were heard, but we're not really looking for a right or wrong answer. So we want to make sure they're comfortable. It's also a good thing to do if your community has like an Easter egg hunt or a family day, something where you're bringing in all the family. You could do this and you could tell stories, have the kids sitting down on the floor around you with the figures, and the adults sitting in chairs right behind them. Again, making sure everybody can see, are they comfortable? And can they hear okay, and tell those stories. A lot of times too in the small group, especially with the dementia ones, after we do that, I allow them to hold the figures. We pass them around, that's just another thing. And then we ask what their thoughts or their answers are, their questions, anything, and we go into discussion. It might be to the story and it might go somewhere else, and that's okay, wherever it takes us. So there's a lot of different ways you can use this with older adults in a lot of different variations. Thank you.
I want to thank Lois, who was unable to attend, and she very kindly recorded for us as she's at her second job today, though we're mindful of this gift of ministry that she offers in this way. I've noticed that some of you had questions in the chat and they may not have been answered. In just a moment, we're going to divide up into 4 groups, as Elaine mentioned. We will spend about 10 minutes in those small groups just so that we have fewer people to talk with and we can maybe see face to face. But in the end of that time, you'll see the timer will close. We'll come back together as a whole group for a closing remark. So just now, we will be divided into those 4 groups. Welcome back, everyone. We'll just take a moment to make sure that we have our entire group back together. And as we have regrouped, I hope that you are full of inspiration, of ideas, of God's story with our own story. And I'm so grateful that you joined for this conversation time. Just a couple things I'd like to remind you of, and that is that the listener of the story is a very key part of receiving a story. And we all need to remember that we can invite people to tell their stories, but then we must listen very carefully to what they have to say. Listen for the theme, for the underlying message of that theme, what role the person telling the story has, and know that the reason they chose that story to tell to you is particularly curated for you especially, which is the way that storytelling has been studied and found, proven. It is chosen, a particular story, for you or for whomever the listener is. And in that importance, we realize listening is so key for every age group, especially children, young people, and older adults who have a lot in common with each other too. So as we wrap up our time today, I want to remind you, as Elaine mentioned earlier, we will be emailing you a resource list tomorrow. That resource list includes, I believe, most of the things, if not all, that you've requested in the chat or mentioned specifically. But if there is something additional, put it in the chat so that we can try to accommodate that well in that resource list that we send out. You'll also have contact information for Elaine and Kaye and I, and you will be able to see our connections to the website and where more resources can be found. But we always welcome what you might have to share with us. We are looking for ways to implement ministry across the ages with all kinds of ages. And so in that sense, we'd welcome not only your ideas of what you're doing, but your questions as well, and ways that we can network with each other. So I'd like to close our conversation today with just once again extending to you the blessings of this time that we've had together, the fact that we are now connected and that we can stay connected in various ways. And we really hope that we'll see you again on one of our upcoming webinars. So you can watch for the recording when it is posted, and you'll have the link for that included in the NBA resources website page. So blessings, everyone, as you go through the rest of your day. I hope you have opportunity to tell your stories and find opportunities to tell and listen to the stories of others. Goodbye and blessings.